Well, good morning. Thank you for inviting me. How many former teachers are here? Hey, you know, our governor just signed a minute of silence every morning. How's that going to work out, teachers? I'm telling you. But yes, thank you again. And I'm actually retired now. I was executive director of the Institute for School Innovation, but I've been retired now for a number of years. And in my retirement, I've discovered the League of Women Voters. And I know I've met some of you who are League members. If you're a League member, let's see your hands. There we go. And the League, of course, we do pride ourselves on being nonpartisan. We do not support candidates. We don't support parties. But we do advocate for issues. And one of the issues that the League is very passionate about is the importance of a quality, high-quality public education system. And so one of the things the League has been opposed to is the proliferation of vouchers for private education at public expense without any accountability or transparency. That's what I'm going to be talking about today. We put together, can everybody hear me okay? We put together a task force. I'm a member of the State League, folks that are interested in education issues, and if any of you want to join us, we would love to have you as a member. But several of my colleagues from Tallahassee, who are also retired educators, people from FSU, good research people, and then some of you may know Sue Legg from Gainesville. She's been a long-time League member. She used to work for the Florida Department of Education in evaluation and measurement. She's very knowledgeable. Again, a great research person that really knows what's going on. So we decided as a group of interested educators and citizens that we would do a little investigating. And we call this a preliminary report because we're just a bunch of old lady volunteers. And what we really hope is that this report will spark interest in somebody like an investigative newspaper. I even have sent this to 60 Minutes, hoping they might pick it up. But we need to get the word out about what's going on in Florida because we are the leader in the national movement to, frankly, really destroy our public education system. So let's talk about the Voucher Program. They call them scholarships. We call it vouchers, which is what they are. There are currently 5 different scholarship programs. There's the one called the Family Empowerment Scholarship, which was the original one, which was supposed to be helping students from low-income families get a private education if they weren't at a school that was doing well. Then came along the Gardner Scholarship, and this is the one for students with special needs. And this one is really very expansive in that parents can use basically like a debit card to buy a whole array of services and tutoring or whatever they think their child may need. Then comes along the Tax Credit Scholarship. And again, this was originally designed to help low-income students attend a private school. Then along came the Hope Scholarship. This one came in about 3 or 4 years ago. And this is a really interesting one because this is for students who can claim they've been bullied to move to another school. And the way this is paid for is with your automobile sales tax. So when you buy a car and when you go to sign all this paperwork, to purchase your car, one of the things you are signing is permission for a portion of the sales tax to go to this Hope Scholarship Program. And most people aren't even aware what they're signing away, but we'll talk about that some more. Then now they've thrown in a 5th scholarship for students with poor reading scores. So now this year, they expanded this even more. Every year it gets bigger and bigger. One of the things I do up in Tallahassee, our Tallahassee League, we have a group called the Lobby Corps. And I know some of you League members have come up to Tallahassee for lobby days when the legislature's in session. So for the past 5 or 6 years since I've been active in the league, now that I'm retired, we go up to the legislature and sit in on the meetings and the hearings, and we testify about the bills that the league is interested in. And we try to fight the bad stuff going on, usually in vain, but we keep trying. But let me tell you what they've done this year. This became law, the governor approved it. But now what they've done is they've taken those 5 scholarship programs and put them into 2. And the one that, what's really interesting about this, and this one is, I think, constitutionally, they have changed where now this Family Empowerment Scholarship is being funded out of FEFP, which is the Florida Educational Finance Program. That is coming directly out of state coffers. Whereas this tax credit scholarship, which is what I'm going to be talking about today, that is the one that is funded through tax credits from corporations, and also, as I mentioned, the sales tax for automobile purchases. So basically, the way the tax credit scholarship has been funded through a very interesting scheme, I would call it, and that's what I'm going to talk to you about today. The other thing they did this year, now this used to be, like we said, for high poverty families. Now if you have an income of up to $100,000, you qualify for a voucher. And this new bill, every year, this goes up and up and up. So pretty soon, you can be making a nice chunk of change and you can get a free scholarship to a private school. This is really a scandalous one, in my opinion. Once in, always in. Now what this means is that if, like, you have a kindergartner and you are making, $70,000, you're not high income by any means, and you get a scholarship. Well, you keep that scholarship all the way through 12th grade, even if your income goes up to whatever. You win the lottery, you still can get a scholarship, as they call them, on the public dime. Now, they used to have where you had to have a prior attendance at a public school that you weren't happy with. Now they've taken that away. So you could be a homeschool kid, you could be any, there's just no requirement other than I want a scholarship. Give it to me. They've also, what they've done is they've expanded the eligibility for a whole array of disabilities. And I've read through the law, it's like a 60-page bill. And it's like one whole page practically of all these different disabilities that qualify. So you could find some reason for your child to be eligible for one of these vouchers. Now here's one too. The money that you get for these, they're called ESA, Educational Savings Account, which is what I call it. You get a debit card basically that you can spend. And if you don't spend it all, you can roll that into a college savings account year after year after year. So this is pretty sweet. Now, they've really thrown a bone to this step-up group that I'm going to be talking about. Now they only have to be audited every 3 years instead of every year, as it used to be. So it's just gets worse and worse. And then the final blow this year, this new expanded bill, these corporate, quote, I put it in quotes, they call them donors. They're not donors. They're not giving it out of their profits and their own money. They're just getting a tax credit. And now they can all be confidential. And you're going to see why that's important in a minute. Let's hold off questions till the end if you don't mind. So, how this whole thing is operated is through these SFOs, they're called, Scholarship Funding Organization. And most people that I talk to, even people like you who are politically astute and who are educators, have never even heard of this. And this has been going on for 20 years. And that's what we decided to look into, is to say the public needs to know how this is all operating. Well, there's this group called Step Up for Students. And I'm calling it Step Up just to be easier to talk about. But this is an organization that administers 99% of all these vouchers. There's one other organization called AAA Scholarship Foundation. They get a 1%, but mostly the Step Up for Students is the big player. They take an administrative fee to be able to manage these scholarship programs. So there again, we calculated in 2020 they were making at least $21 million in administrative fees that they get to keep. Now, one of my colleagues on my task force said, "Sally, just show this picture. That's all you need to talk about. This is their headquarters. This is no little mom and pop deal. This is, as I said, there you saw the picture of their headquarters in Jacksonville. They have 265 employees, and again, this is data we could find from 2019. It's hard to find. You really have to dig, and that's why we're hoping somebody with more resources will be able to dig deeper than we can find. But they've got a large employee. They have an $18 million payroll. Their president is a man named Doug Tuttle. He's not a nice salary for a nonprofit person. 11 of their key employees make 6 figures. And remember, this is all coming from our tax money that's going right into their coffers. They have an 8-member board, and you might not be surprised that a lot of them are all connected politically and corporately. And one of the things, one of our Democrats, I've got to find out about this, our own Congressman Al Lawson is on their board. Really? So you should know about that. So I may slip up and use some of their terminology, but I just want you to know that they've been very skillful at hoodwinking the public into thinking this is really a wonderful thing. So what is a voucher? Basically, again, it's just a state money that you can get privately to use however you want. They call them scholarships. Now that has a real nice cachet, oh, my child gets a scholarship. And so it sounds like a wonderful program to help these poor kids have a scholarship. The other one that really rankles me is these so-called donations. They're not donations. These people are using their tax money that should be going into the general revenue to support our state government and our public schools. It's going right over to Step Up for Students. It's not a donation, even though they call it a charity. No. Really what they are is a money management marketing firm. And it gets away with being known as a charity. Now, where the revenue sources, where are they getting this money? The big one is from corporate income taxes, excise taxes on liquor. One of the big supporters of this is the liquor industry, ironically. Gas and oil production, insurance premiums, sales tax, the ones I talked about for your automobile sales. But look at the red numbers there. Since it started, $3 billion they've been diverted over to Step Up instead of to our government, which should be where that money should be going. So look at who the big boys are. And remember, this new legislation, now it's going to be secret. We're not going to know anymore who the contributors are. Some of the notable names you may recognize. And I always liked Skechers. But now, again, this is the last we could find was 2018. And now they hide it, so we don't know who all is donating. But $618 million has been donated, not donated again, diverted, not donated. And we don't know from then on. So what happened, one of the reasons that they wanted to make this secret now is that in 2019, when some of these corporations were revealed, there was a backlash because 60% of these private schools are religious schools, mostly Christian schools, and many of them discriminate against gay and lesbian and transgender children. So they got a lot of backlash that people were not happy that these corporations were contributing to this discrimination. So now they've fixed it, so now we don't know. But this is when we did know some of the donors. Now let's talk about what Step Up does. This is one of their ads on social media. But what I'm telling you is that they are pushing this whole thing, and they're making money off of it, of course. But they do these webinars, and I signed on to one, and you can too. It's very interesting. They really sell these things to the parents. These are for parents to get on, and they help them apply, and they do all the back work for the parents that want to sign up for one of these vouchers. They have a whole array of consultants who help the parents to figure out how to do. The big thing, lobbying. And this is what really first piqued my interest in this group, because as I told you, I would go up to the Capitol during legislative session, and there would be these hordes of cute little kids that would be there in these meetings, all with matching t-shirts. I love my private school, you know, oh, this is, my grades have never been better. And they would come up and give testimony, and it was very compelling. And I'm thinking most of these were, you know, probably poor children. And I'm thinking, how did they get up here to Tallahassee? Well, it turns out Step Up puts them on these bus trips, and they bring them up from Miami and everywhere else, and they're really, you know, cute little kids, and their parents come and give, you know, tearful testimony. My child was failing, and now they're so successful. And so they're just really doing a great job up in Tallahassee. I got to tell you, it's very, you know, even somebody like me, oh, you're so cute. And they're doing that. They make campaign contributions big time. We're talking millions. I'll talk about that in a minute. Now they also have this whole little cottage industry starting up of educational supplies and tutoring services. So when you go on the Step Up for Students website, you can get a direct link. You want to use your little educational savings account debit card, conveniently right there. You can just click on it and buy your supplies. And they also, Step Up, spends a lot of their resources and our money on lobbying these corporations, because the corporations have to make a choice. Instead of giving the money to the state with their taxes, you know, bring it over here so we can fund these scholarships for these poor kids that need our help. Very, very clever people. Now, what Step Up is supposed to be doing, because let me tell you something, Department of Education completely has hands off. And when we tried to find out what's, you know, is there any oversight from the Department of Education? No. This is all private money. No, we turn it all over to Step Up for Students. The scholarship funding organization does all the oversight. So they're supposed to be looking over, again, this is the latest data we could find. Now again, it's growing every year, because this is going to be a lot bigger. But 1,800 private schools they're supposed to be supervising and monitoring. And as I said, 66% of these are religious schools, and a lot of them are in church basements. You know, we're talking about very questionable academic rigor, to say the least. And there, again, it's the parent's choice. We don't, you know, you ask the Department of Education, what about the academic rigor? Well, that's the parent's choice, you know, whatever they want. And, you know, there's a lot of gullible parents out there that get bamboozled by some of these sales pitches. So they've all, to date, when we investigated this, as of 2020, they've given out 1 million scholarships, as they call them. And these educational savings accounts now are a direct subsidy to the parent. And they're supposed to be making sure they're not spending it to go to Disney World, but they can say it's a field trip. I'm taking an educational field trip. So there's very questionable oversight. Again, this is our money being diverted to these private vendors. They're supposed to be monitoring all these things. But what we discovered on my last coat is these guard, because we would go up to the legislature and people would come up and say, who's watching this? And the legislators would say, oh, there are guardrails, we have guardrails, so they have to conform to all these things. Well, in our opinion, these guardrails are made of toothpicks because there's not a lot of oversight and management from the government. They're supposed to be taking norm reference tests. Now, it's interesting that when you go up to the Capitol and you hear the testimony from the parents of these kids that are getting these so-called scholarships, a lot of them are so happy because their kids don't have to take FCAT anymore. So all this testing that gets piled on our poor public schools, that's they don't have to do any of that. There's unless the enrollment is at a certain level, they don't have to give any tests. We have no idea how. It's all the parents' choice. Whatever the parents are happy, we're happy. So, what about all these things that we should be caring about? These are our future leaders, ladies and gentlemen. These are, how are we going to have our country run? Teacher qualifications? We don't know. There are none as far as we can tell. In fact, we uncovered a lot of these little church basement kind of schools where somebody can do a homeschool with, get 10 kids, that's a nice chunk of change if every kid's getting $10,000. So we don't know what the curriculum is. Parent choice. Are they learning anything? Now these parents that come up to testify say, my child's getting straight A's for the first time. Well, teachers, come on. Have we ever heard of grade inflation? Or, you get an A if you wash the chalkboard, I guess they don't have chalkboards anymore. I'm dating myself, sorry. Are these schools safe and secure? We don't know. What about students with special needs? And this is a real scandal. Because what happens is they bring these kids in and then they don't have the services. They don't have the qualified teachers, and the parents soon discover that and want to get their kids out of there. Wow, then you have good luck with that, trying to get your child's records and things. It's really, we discovered a lot of really problematic things going on with that. Now, we don't know what's the source of they call them donations, these corporate tax dodges, is basically what it is. But again, since 2019, the legislature has managed to hide it all. We don't have to know who these corporate donors are anymore. It's all secret. We found that there was very lax in a lot of the accounting things that were going on. One of our people on our team named Joan Leggett, who's an author, she's really good at digging into stuff. And she found all kinds of really shady stuff going on as far as who's monitoring this stuff. Sensitive material, who's protecting these kids who may have things that could be damaging to them. There's supposed to be a financial audit of any schools that receive more than $250,000, but again, we saw a lot of evidence that those were either not done at all or done very incompletely. And Step Up for students is making a nice little income off of interest money that is supposed to be going for more scholarships, but we couldn't see much evidence that that was happening. And then what is the remedy for schools not in compliance? We had a person from Jacksonville who's on the Education League group with us. She wasn't part of our team, but she inquired about with the Department of Education. She wrote a letter because she found a school, clearly, I think they were in the Orlando area, a private school that was just so far out of compliance with anything you want to see. And the response from the Department of Education was, not our problem. These are all private schools, and they get private donations. And so the parents, it's all the parents' choice. And if the parents aren't happy, they can take their kids out. But the Department of Education has no responsibility for this at all. Well, as you can imagine, just follow the money. What's going on? People are making money off of this. And I'm talking now, this is just the voucher program. This doesn't even mention the charter school industry making a fortune on these privately run charter schools. This is just a whole nother deal going on with these vouchers. And John Kirtley, who I said was Untitled Chapter, who founded this whole thing, he's a billionaire hedge fund manager, and he has his own PAC, political action committee that makes donations to candidates. And just in 2020 alone, his PAC gave $1.4 million. That's not bad. There's a lot of, I hate to say incestuous, but I guess that's the word I'll use. But this is happening in Florida, but it's also growing in the other states. Alabama, Arizona is a big one. They're huge on these vouchers, private school vouchers. So there's a lot of cross-pollination with all these groups. And we found that some of the Step Up for Students board members are also part of a Alabama Scholarship Opportunity Fund, which is a whole other growing voucher deal over in Alabama. Now, anybody know Senator Diaz from Miami, Hialeah? Well, he actually happens to work for a private charter school company, and he's the chief architect of a lot of this legislation up in Tallahassee. Manny has his own PAC, which gives to candidates $1.2 million they gave out this last legislative session. And Doug Tuttle, who's the president of Step Up for Students, now I should tell you that once our report came out, Step Up jumped on this right away. And they said, well, this is old news. But I'll tell you one thing, they have not been able to refute one thing we said. They've just said, well, these little ladies don't understand, that kind of thing, But they're scared because we're bringing this stuff out. But he even bragged, again, this was a while back, but now they keep it quiet, but they are giving a lot of money to the politicians to support this whole scheme. And then at the last session, in one of the legislative committee hearings, when some of us were up there, or we weren't there, they wouldn't let us come this year. You had to, because of COVID, you had to go to the Civic Center, which is about a mile from the Capitol, and they would only give you 1 minute to have testimony. It was just such a closed deal. But anyway, one of the things that we monitored one of the committee hearings, and the Step Up for Students people were just ecstatic that this new expanded voucher program, where they're going to do these educational savings account, or debit cards as I call them, was going to create this whole new opportunity for cottage industries to grow up, and people could make money, on these school supplies and tutoring services and all this stuff. So they're really excited about the potential to make a lot of money off of this. And again, this is our money being diverted over to this huge operation. So in closing, and I want to leave time for questions, what we have here, and this is what the League is upset about and what we're opposed, we are creating in Florida and many other states separate, unequal, and unconstitutional school systems. So we have our public school system, which is over-regulated. I mean, I don't know, we're losing teachers in droves because they can't do anything. Well, now they have to do their minute of silence, It's always one more thing for the teachers have to do. And we're testing these kids to death in our public schools. We're over-regulating that. And then we're creating this whole free-flowing, whatever the parents want system with absolutely no regulation on our dime being diverted. So it's really a smokescreen. And the big thing the League has argued about is the separation of church and state. Because as I said, 60% of these private schools that are getting these diverted vouchers are religious Christian schools who discriminate against certain groups. And again, this is our money. However, what was really clever was this whole deal to set up this private, quote, charity, so that when it was brought to the courts that this was unconstitutional, the court ruled that there was lack of taxpayer standing because the taxpayers aren't paying for these, quote, scholarships. This private charity is. I mean, it's just, and of course now the court is stacked. So I don't think they're even going to try to sue it again because they know it's not going to have a chance to win in the Supreme Court in Florida now. But was a really smart idea to set this whole step up for students up because it skirts the constitutional issue. But as I said, again, they're bleeding us to death. Now the league has another lawsuit going about SB 90, which is the voter suppression stuff. So we can't afford to do another lawsuit. And that's what I hope that some other groups will look into this more, because it's just so blatantly unconstitutional. And especially, as I said, in this new expanded bill that just passed this year that the governor signed, they are actually taking directly out of the General Revenue Fund, in addition to these corporate write-offs. So, anybody know who this is? Come on, educators. Who's the father of public education?
Horace Mann.
Yay! Horace Mann. Way to go, Pat. All right, so what is the end game? Where are they going with this? And I know, again, the league is nonpartisan, but we also have to tell the truth. We're talking about the Republicans doing this. I mean, all of this was passed on straight party lines. And so it's going where the end game, and we've heard testimony up at the Capitol, there are those up there who want this to be 100% parent choice school system, that every child will get a scholarship, as they call them, and do whatever they want. So, Horace Mann reminded us, this was well over 100 years ago, when they were trying to get away from this system back in the old days when only the rich people could go to the really good schools, and there was just this whole array of cottage industries and whatnot. Horace Mann proposed we needed to change this. We were moving into the industrial age, and we couldn't have a country be successful with that kind of a cottage industry system of education. So he said, the public can no longer be ignorant. This education system should be controlled, sustained by an interested public, because of course back then too, most of the schools were run by churches. The Catholic Church in particular, of course, had a lot of parochial schools. This education should provide for children from a variety of backgrounds. It wasn't just for the wealthy kids or the white kids. It should be non-sectarian. And this was, again, the beginning of our public education system that built this country. It should be taught using the tenets of a free society. These are all of Horace Mann's 6 principles. And finally, this education should be provided by well-trained professional teachers. And that became the start of the teacher colleges and training teachers to be professionals. So isn't it ironic that that the current legislature wants to see us go back to that system of everybody's on their own, parents' choice, no accountability, certified teachers? I don't know. What's the curriculum? They could be teaching them, voodoo for all we know. It's up to the parents, whatever the parents want. So we are in danger, ladies and gentlemen, of moving back to a very bad time when education is sort of a free-for-all instead of a high-quality public education system. So that's what we found in our preliminary investigation, and we hope somebody will pick this up This is my information. I can do this presentation by Zoom or come. It's really nice to be here in person. I've enjoyed being here and seeing you. But help us spread the word, because people need to know what's going on with our tax dollars, and our public education system is really in jeopardy. And so now I'll be happy to take a few questions or comments.
May I make the first comment?
Yes, Pat.
Sally, isn't this like to me, this is a bait and switch. As a taxpayer, I'm paying taxes for my schools, Sumter County, and then the state is handing my money, which I understand is going to those schools, onto a business to then do what it wants. How come I wouldn't have standing as a taxpayer to say, this is a bait and switch?
Well, I think this year with this expanded program, that is a better argument. The Gardner Scholarship, or the Family Empowerment Scholarship is that's the one that they're going to be funding right out of the general revenue funds. Now, see, before they could say, no, you know, this charity is funding it, so when people are making donations, it's not. But the courts, you know, again, the courts have ruled that we don't have standing because it's not funded by taxpayers. But now this new one, I think it is. But again, who's going to be able to come up with the millions and millions of dollars it takes to bring a lawsuit? And then, of course, with the Supreme Court we have now in Florida and the United States Supreme Court, who knows, you know, if they would be favorable to this. But I think you're exactly right. In fact, when I first started working on this report, I told my team, I said, I think we should call this a money laundering scheme. But the problem is, it's all legal. It's not, you know, money laundering is an illegal thing, but what they're doing here is exactly a bait and switch, totally legal, and you get away with it because nobody knows, and nobody cares.
Boycott our taxes for education until they start being honest and open about it. Sally, I passed out cards for people to jot down questions.
And then
do you all want me to collect them? Or
yeah, if you collect the cards and ask me any questions, that would be easy. So you got a card?
I have a card, but I have a question on the card.
Okay.
What, can you get any educational outcomes from these schools? Is there any evidence that they do better?
No, the only evidence, if it's a private school that has, I think if they get $250,000 in these scholarships, they have to do a norm reference test, and it's submitted to a university supposedly overseeing this. However, that's another thing we found when we looked at the audit reports. There were many cases where that wasn't happening, and then we wondered, what's the consequences? No, nothing. So, and then of course all these these debit cards, we don't know because they don't have to take the state test. They don't have to. We have absolutely no idea, and so there's no accountability. Yes, go ahead.
What about the federal Department of Education? Don't they have something to say about Public Law 94-142 and special education requirements?
Well, that's interesting. Maybe the federal will start tightening up a little bit, but of course, with Betsy DeVos there, they were looking the other way as well. When we inquired, another person asked a question about that with the Department of Education. Because there were some questions, some of the children were not doing the IEPs and everything like they're supposed to. And the Department of Education said, well, that's not our problem. Again, you know, Step Up is supposed to be monitoring all this, which obviously is not happening. And now they have to do an audit every 3 years to report these findings. So it's just a terrible scandal. So, yes.
First of all, this thing sounds like a pyramid scheme.
Pyramid.
Somebody's going to be losing at the end of it, right?
Well, I don't know, who's losing are the kids.
Kids are losing.
Yeah.
Okay, my daughter is a teacher for like 27 years. And I think she's going to be leaving it because she can't take it. It's just crazy. She just comes home crying every day.
Yeah, teachers, we have that's another thing related to your daughter is we have a huge teacher shortage in Florida now. It's scandalous the number of kids being taught by permanent substitutes, again, with no training. People, they are driving teachers away. I mean, I really do think their objective is to destroy our public school system.
Oh, absolutely.
And
Maybe she go private.
And have this money scheme that everybody can make money off of. It's private schools.
I mean, and you said churches, have these schools, but they don't pay any taxes, right?
Yeah.
And if you don't take the FCAT, how can you go on to college? So they're going to lose there, right?
Yeah. No, the children are definitely being shortchanged. They don't. And then we also have heard stories like when, especially students with special needs, who get into these private schools. And again, we're talking about really mediocre. We're not talking about the high, like in Tallahassee, we have a school called McClay School. And they're not taking these scholarships. These are like church basement kind of schools. And again, you can, now with this new, you can just be a homeschool. Like I could set up a little school in my house and bring in 10 kids and make $10,000 on each kid. Have a little homeschool. Am I trained? No, And so when the parents finally wake up, or a parent, that wait, this isn't what I thought it was going to be, then good luck trying to get your kid out of there as far as getting their records, getting your money back. They keep the money then, as far as we can tell. Again, somebody needs to look into this that knows more than we do. But what we uncovered deserves to be really investigated more clearly, and the public needs to know what's happening.
What about
Well, here, let's do another question. Yes. Thanks.
Sally, thank you, number one. As loud as you can. Oh, sure, I'm sorry. As a former special educator, and I still educate because I see someone who's in need and I want to help them, the money from voucher schools to build them goes back to the people who built them if they go out of business. Is that correct?
Well, you're talking about charter schools.
Right.
Again, that's a whole other thing. See, that's what I'm talking about is totally private schools.
Right.
Now, charter schools are technically public schools. They are monitored by the Department of Education, sort of, kind of. But you're right. What's happening with the charter industry is a whole other deal, where these private companies, and I personally was involved with one called Imagine Schools, and they build these buildings, and somebody once said, and I think it's true, they are a real estate company disguised as an education system. But they get the taxpayers to build these charter school buildings. You have one here in the Villages. And the developer then charges big management fees, and then if the school goes under, which is what happened to the Imagine School in Tallahassee, the company keeps the building that the taxpayers have paid for. There's just a lot of really scary stuff going on. Okay, one more.
The charter school here in the Villages, every year in the paper, they make a big deal out of the wonderful scores that the children are achieving, like, 98% go on to college and blah, blah, blah. But what they don't tell you is that they cherry pick the students.
Of course.
I've had friends who have tried to get their kids into the school, and they could qualify based on the work thing, but they were told that they test them, and oh no, your child's too low, they need to go to the public school. So sure, if you cherry pick and only pick the top students, and then you can brag about your scores, that's comparing apples and oranges when they compare the public schools to that charter school.
I thought they had a word for those.
There's a lot of stuff like that. You're exactly right. They can cherry pick.
I'm going to just make a pitch for next month. Sally Moss, who is one of the chairmen of Sumter County School Board, will be here as our presenter. So please come back next month, July 17th.
Why don't we take like one more?
Well, maybe
Or
we'll be.
whatever, I mean, I'm here as long as you want me to be.
Go ahead.
Okay. It seems like since they fall under the 503C requirements, that even though the IRS is substantially understaffed, it seems to me like that we should encourage them to look into this.
Yeah.
It seems like $880,000
Right.
for a charity, for a CEO to make it.
Exactly. And then the other thing is like the one thing, I used to run a nonprofit, my organization. It's illegal to make interest unless you use the interest back for your program. Well, again, when we looked into their audits, we couldn't find any evidence. What were they doing with all that interest? We don't know. So there's a lot of things that the IRS could be looking into. Yeah.
All right, over here. Did you have a question?
Is there any long-term,
Okay.
sorry,
Let's
maybe long-term is the wrong word, but is anybody thinking about the ramifications of an entire cohort of children who are undereducated and not able to get good jobs or get into good schools?
Yeah, that's the really tragic thing is it's so unfair to these children. And again, like Horace Mann knew that when America was moving into the industrial age, we needed a better educated people. Now, here we are going into the information age when we need even more educated, smart people getting good education, and we're going backwards. So yes, the implications for this are very dire. It really worries me, these kids are. And plus these schools, the parents are so naive about, my kid gets straight A's for the first time. Well, that doesn't mean anything. Again, grade inflation, but they feel good. They make them feel good. My child is finally successful.
I guess mine is more a pitch to the whole group that I was on a school board for 2 terms up in Illinois. And
speak up, please?
Yeah, sure. I was on a school board for 2 terms in Illinois and did a lot against charter schools and a lot of other stuff. But running for school board is a really important thing. Having a voice on a school board is a really important thing. So they're elected by different areas and you only run in that area. It's a non-partisan race, meaning you don't need to declare a party. So I'm really glad that you're inviting somebody from the school board here. But that's something that needs to just be watched all the time. I've been a part of recruiting for 20-some years for the district that I used to be on the school board outside of Chicago. But that's really something, when you see these kind of things, it's all across the board. It's the charters, it's the local, it's all across the board, and we are leaving kids behind.
Well, I think it's very telling that the Department of Education in Florida has no voice. They have no information. And if any of you, I don't know if there are any other boosters in here. I know the charter school has a booster club. Well, so does Wildwood Middle High School. And my husband and I decided to join that and help fundraise and support those students. They have to work for everything. You want a field trip, you got to raise the money. Their funds are very limited, and I can't speak at length about that, and that's why I thought it would be a really good idea to have someone from Sumter County School Board come and speak to us. So questions that you may have about funding, what's provided to the students, how much money is being diverted from the district. Hopefully she'll be able to share that with you. She did present to boosters, and I was very surprised to learn that Sumter County pays the charter school $4 million a year, basically in rent. I always thought we had a magnanimous developer who just gave us gave it, but he didn't. So there's a lot that we don't know as taxpayers. And our tax money is the fuel for what politicians are doing. So we have an obligation that a lot of us, myself included, wasn't really aware that I needed to work
You go to the newspaper?
I wanted to just say thank
Go to
you
the
and,
newspaper?
pardon me?
Do you go to the newspaper?
Yes, I have an op-ed that we've had in the Tallassee. I have contacted the Miami Herald, the Tampa
Orlando
Tribune, Sentinel. Nobody's picked it up yet, so help me. We need to help. We need to get the word out.
We need Rachel back.
It is, yeah, we need 60 minutes or something like that. Yeah, I've been trying. Yes.
Well, Sally, did you mention that Manny Diaz works for one of these schools?
Yeah. Yes.
Isn't he the chair of our Florida Democratic Party?
No. There is a Manny Diaz who's a
Okay.
Democrat. There's another, that's confusing. Manny Diaz Jr. is the one that works for Charter Schools USA, and he's a Republican, big time. And he is chair of the Education Committee, the Senate Education Committee. But I wanted to thank you for being here, for coming, and I brought a gift. Does anybody, is there anybody that has grandchildren or children in the ranges of 5 to 10 years old? Raise your hand. Grandchildren. This is my book that I did with my daughter called Best Buddies Birthdays, and it's how to have a homegrown, old-fashioned birthday party. Nowadays, you have to spend a fortune on these birthday parties. And my daughter, who had at the time, she lived in Burbank, California, she was just, we're all outraged. We're spending like thousands of dollars on these birthday parties for little kids. And the poor little birthday child is sort of an afterthought. It's really a party for grown-ups.